coming up in this hour, I'm going to be talking about that review of grooming gangs by Baroness Casey. It was published yesterday and accused public bodies, including the Home Office, local councils and police forces, of covering up sickening evidence of Asian grooming gangs for years, and also shying away from dealing with uncomfortable questions about the ethnicity of rapists for fear of appearing racist. Goodness me, was that news to you? Because it seemed to me that was something we already knew. But the hard-hitting audit on grooming gangs by the Whitehall troubleshooter also warned that asylum seekers and foreign nationals are involved in a significant proportion of live police investigations going on right now into child sex rape gangs. I've certainly been speaking to people in the last 24 hours who suggested to me the problem isn't in the past. Not only is it still going on now, which we already knew, it may be worse now than it ever was. We'll be talking about that. Lots of top guests. We're going to be talking to Maggie Oliver, of course, who's one of the biggest whistleblowers in the Manchester area. But also we're going to be talking to one of the many victims, survivors, about what she makes of the public inquiry that is going to be set up and what it needs to do, what it needs to achieve before it can actually get answers and do something for the victims. Plus, we're going to be talking about the Iran-Iraq conflict, particularly Iran-Iraq, Iran-Israel conflict, as Donald Trump left the G7 summit a day early, but denied claims on social media by Emmanuel Macron, who apparently he says doesn't know anything, but he was working on a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. He insisted that the reason was much bigger. Lots of expectations that the US may join Israel in those attacks on Iran. Plus, we all heard about Nigel Farage and his new Doge team trying to look at government waste when they took over Kent County Council. They've discovered that back in 2022, at least £1,000. OK, not that much money in the big scheme of things, not in one person's council tax for a lot of families. But in 2022, they spent £1,000 of Kent County Council taxpayers' hard-earned money on paying for illegal migrants to be given free TV licences at the expense of the taxpayer. I kid you not. Going to talk about that. Plenty more besides. Do stay tuned throughout the show, all the top guests, and included in those top guests is, I'm delighted to say, moved from Monday, is commentator Sam Armstrong, who joins us. I'm very confused, not working on a Monday and you being here on a Tuesday. I don't know what day of the week it is. How are you?
You've taken the day off just to get away from me.
Absolutely, and then you come in. I mean, to be fair, you know, a few funerals aren't a day off, if you know what I mean. But anyway, important to give a good send-off, that's what I think. Right, look, let's talk about this report from Louise Casey. Here's my first question, because I want to put to the audience, you know, do you trust that a public inquiry will uncover the truth? Tell us why you think it will. Tell us why you think it won't. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. But my first question to you, Sam, is really, you know, I suppose that is like, you know, do you trust that now we know there is going to be a public inquiry, will it uncover the truth, given that everyone has shied away from a proper public inquiry into this? And by the way, the Tories did too. They're all as bad as each other on this front. But given that it'll be Keir Starmer who sets up, given that pretty much everywhere where it's at its worst, as far as we're aware, this grooming gang culture, it's in Labour-run local areas. That is a simple matter of fact. Do you trust that we're going to get the truth?
I hope so, because we need to end what has been one of the largest, most systematic, most organised, most orchestrated cover-ups in the history of this country. I did not need a report from Baroness Casey to tell me that I wasn't a racist, or it is not racist to identify patently obvious statistical patterns that happen with a group of offending. Andrew Norfolk did not need a government...
He was the Times journalist who sadly died recently.
Indeed. Did not need a government inquiry in order to get to the bottom of this. In fact, in each and every step of his inquiries and anybody else that has ever attempted to look into this subject, he was confronted with an organised attempt to sweep this issue as far under the carpet as it possibly could be. And the result has been that thousands upon thousands upon thousands of young, I don't like the word, but vulnerable girls with complex needs.
Two-thirds were in social care. There's a giveaway.
People in care, that really people that need the most help society can give, who were instead turned over to gangs of animals that abused them in the most appalling way for decades, with impunity, covered up by councils, by policemen, by politicians, often in the Labour Party, but not exclusively. And there has never been a scandal that has been more glaringly staring us in the face for so long, about which everybody, the media, politicians, the authorities, has shown such a profound lack of curiosity about.
Not all the media. I mean, again, all credit to the Times. They were the ones who originally broke this. Daily Mail were writing about this in 2010. People were talking about this, but everyone was being castigated as a racist for, I remember, talking about it on air many years ago when I used to be on another station. Now, at the time, the ethnicity issue, and one of the things that I like about Dame Louise Casey, I'm sure our politics don't align, on paper, but actually she's been absolutely solid on everything. Every time she's been brought in as a troubleshooter by actually governments of different hues over the years, can you get to the bottom of this? She goes in, she meets the right people, she talks, she's just a no-nonsense, cut through the BS kind of person and gets to the bottom of it. And as she points out repeatedly in this report, it's not racist to seek out information on ethnicity if you think it might be a relevant factor, and then to talk about it if it is. And the evidence seems conclusive. By the way, what is amazing is that 2/3 of these cases, they don't record the ethnicity of either the perpetrator or the victim. You sign up to get a library card or your local jobs. Your ethnicity is recorded constantly in every survey, in every official document, but miraculously the police and the social workers don't record it as just simply as a matter of a description of someone. Was someone male or female? Were they white or brown or black? Or these are basic things. But here's the thing that really gets me on this is that suddenly we've got a government, suddenly we've got Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, and others saying, yes, there will be a grooming inquiry, a public inquiry. Yes, it's needed. Yes, we're going to apologise to victims. Yes, there is an issue with ethnicity that was covered up. And basically, and again, these aren't the only people who were committing crimes of this particular type of organised child sex abuse, this modus operandi of grooming gangs. 100% we know that the vast majority of those carrying this out were not Asian men. They were largely of Pakistani background. We now know a number of them are, not even British born here. Yeah. We now know in this, some are even doing it now, are asylum seekers and foreign nationals. Why the hell they are in this country? You've got to ask that. And I think that's going to be a big, long debate to come. But there's sudden about turn from the government when only weeks ago, Tim Montgomery, now of Reform, was on, a BBC show, and a Labour replies to him, and he says, well, let's talk about the grooming gangs, and that dog whistle, that racist dog whistle. The Prime Minister himself talking about the Tories jumping on a far right basis bandwagon for saying there should be a national public inquiry. Suddenly it's all changed, but there is nothing in this report that I didn't already know. Now, she spells it out brilliantly, and I think she's done a fantastic job, but anyone who had been paying attention to this topic, and you'd like to think that the former Director of Public Prosecutions, the now Prime Minister, and the former Shadow Home Secretary and former head of the Home Affairs Select Committee and now Home Secretary might have been among the people paying attention to this over the years. There's no way in the world, if they read more than 4 sodding paragraphs of any news article on this issue, that they wouldn't know these facts. So what's changed? Why is it absolutely vital and important to have a public national inquiry now, but 3 days ago, if you wanted that, you were jumping on a far-right bandwagon? What's changed?
Well, Julia, let's be very, very clear. Actually, the data on the ethnicity of these offenders was collected by the police forces. Anybody knows that a police force, when they're chasing down the street after a suspect, they will describe a suspect.
IC1, IC3.
Exactly. Yeah. This data was collected. What it was not was collated and analysed, because too many people knew the consequences of collating, analysing, publishing this data, which is there would be a massive collapse in public support and consent.
What?
For the cover-up, for the acceptance of the broken system of multiculturalism we have in this country.
Maybe it's not a good idea to import people from a culture where child sexual abuse isn't considered to be a bad thing.
But Julia,
maybe let's throw that out there as a mind-blowing idea.
They have attempted everything. Even today, I opened up a copy. It was my own stupid mistake, but I opened up a copy of The Guardian to see a piece by Polly.
Was that by accident? Were you trying to wrap some fish and chips? What were you doing?
To see a piece by Polly Toynbee, a columnist of many, many years' experience.
Who's called me far right, by the way.
Arguing even today, even in light of the Casey review, that there is not a disproportionate number of Pakistani men represented in this type of offending. These people are rape gang deniers. I'm going to take their language and use it back at them. They are rape gang deniers. We saw BBC journalists angrily arguing with guests who attempted to point out the basic realities of this offending on Newsnight a few weeks ago, saying there is no evidence that Pakistani men are overrepresented. This data was here. Everybody knew it was here. They tried hiding it. They tried not putting it together. They tried denying it. They tried every trick in the book to keep
and they've
this
used this argument in recent reports about how, you know, the vast majority of child sexual abuse in this country are white men. Well, of course they are. We're a vastly majority white population, and the vast majority are you know, the abusers are men. Of course that's the case. However, when people are overrepresented in the statistics, so and Louise Casey goes into this when they look at you know, some of these key places where they're looking at, like they're saying, you know, in Rotherham, nearly 2/3 of those who were recorded as who were gangs of men who were abusive were of mainly Pakistani heritage, despite the fact that only 4% of the town's population were of Pakistani ethnicity. They were being overrepresented for the number of people in the towns, and this is the case across everywhere where they know where, you know, the ethnicity. The fact that in 2/3 of cases they don't record it, I think that tells you exactly what's going on. I mean, come on. But this is the key thing. When we used to discuss this, I mean, God, I'm thinking way back in, you know, the early 2010s, discussing this on the radio and writing about it. The issue for me was like, well, you know, is it an overrepresentation by men of this background, or is it the fact that because it was men of this background, because it was Asian, Pakistani, Muslim men, and because of the sort of the white guilt, hand-wringing, bleeding heart, liberal, multicultural, citizen of nowhere views of those people, running Labour councils, moving to the top of the police, in social services and others, that what you couldn't do when you'd spotted this, because how could they not have noticed this? Oh, come on, it was under their noses. That it was, you couldn't tackle it, because then that would give, and Louise Casey notes this, that would give succor to the racists. Okay, but it's not racist to say I don't think we should have people here who are doing this. But I think one of the other crucial things is, and I've discussed this with Maggie Oliver's on the show a bit later, and I've discussed this with her so many times, it still blows my mind, that whatever your concerns about, you know, multicultural community cohesion and all that nonsense, why did they think that ordinary men and women of Pakistani heritage living in Rochdale or wherever, why did they think that they would not want to know, not want men from their community who were child abusers to be prosecuted? Surely that will be in their interest too. Do you think these people aren't abusing their own children as well? Really? I mean, there has been, let's be honest, a deafening silence from these so-called Pakistani community leaders and Asian community leaders and Muslim community leaders in this country over this issue. Now, I'm of half Irish Catholic stock. I don't think that I should have to speak up because the IRA have done something. It's not my responsibility. I don't think Jews are responsible for what happens in Israel, the Muslims are responsible for Islamist terrorist act. That's nonsense. However, if you're professing to be a community leader and you don't think that this is an issue you should be speaking on, I think that's a bit strange, because surely you should be saying, we want the local councils, we want the police, we want the social work, we want them to be dealing with this, because these men are a disgrace to our community, a disgrace to our ethnicity, a disgrace to local people. We want them out. We haven't heard any of that. Why not?
Julia, what these people did, the policemen, the social workers, the council officials, it was not an accident.
No.
It wasn't motivated just by a do-gooder sense. They found girls turned out onto the streets in the early hours of the morning, having been passed around like pieces of meat by groups of Pakistani men who had taken turns to rape them, one after another after another. And what did the police do? They arrested the girl.
Yep.
They hauled her into a police station and they punished her. They took the same girls from the same houses time and time and time again. What these people did, they knew exactly what they were doing. Not a single one of those police officers, not a single one of those council officials, not a single person at any level, at any stage in the British state or in a position of authority in this country has ever been prosecuted.
No, and that's the key thing that I want to come out of a public inquiry. And it's something that Maggie Oliver, again, the whistleblower from the Greater Manchester area, that she that she wants to look at. And we talked about her crowdfunder before, where, trying to actually get, team of lawyers, literally, we're going to go in, we're going to go prosecute these people. We know all this. What we need to know, we know what happened in terms of the girls. And again, you mentioned the number with girls. I mean, it's extraordinary. 4,000 police cautions were issued between 89 and 95 to children between the ages of 10 and 18 for offences relating to prostitution. A 10-year-old can't be a prostitute. A 10-year-old is the victim of rape. It's not possible to legally have sex consensually with a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old. It's rape. And the fact that was on the statute books until 2015, I still find mind-blowing. We've had a father, haven't we? He was arrested and charged after he basically just tried to get into a house to rescue his daughter from being gang raped. The stories are all so horrendous. They are just like, you want to put your head in the sand just to not know about it, but you need to know about it to do something about it. But I suppose the thing that just really, really I find really difficult is the fact that these people did this, and there's been this cover-up. And I think the most important thing to come out of this is not everyone hand-wringing. I don't think the grooming victims want apologies and things. What they want is the little beeps who gang raped them and abused them and plied them with drugs and with drink and beat them and and tortured them. And sold them around, to every Tom, Dick and Harry, in the country, that they should be behind bars, and that the people who covered it up should also be behind bars. I want, quite seriously, hundreds, possibly even thousands of police officers, social workers, counsellors, others to be categorized. I want them prosecuted, and I want them behind bars, because what they did in lots of ways to me was almost worse than what the rapists did, because they must have known what they were doing was wrong. And we know that the people who knew it was wrong didn't carry on doing it. Maggie Oliver and the other whistleblowers who went, I cannot stand by while we're allowing this to happen and the police won't act. I'm going to leave my job so I can speak freely about this. So some people did do the right thing. We need everyone to do the right thing. If you're working in the police or as a social worker or in care home or a doctor, if a 13-year-old gets brought in by a guy who's twice her age, who's clearly not her dad because he's different ethnicity, and she's not calling him dad, and she's pregnant and she's got bruises all over her and is clearly a victim of drugs, and you don't go straight to the police, I'm sorry, you should be prosecuted. But as simple as that for me.
But Julia, we come to this today with this belated recognition because a baroness who's a very impressive woman, but an educated, articulate woman, has written a report and come to this conclusion. But for years, working class girls from tough situations had tried to tell this story for years. Yeah. They had said all of these stories were known. Every tale had been told.
Police, they went to social workers.
And because of their class, because they were working class, because they were from towns, because they were of their ethnicity, and because people in middle class jobs didn't want to hear a certain kind of story, they were ignored. Yeah. Never again can we allow thousands upon thousands of girls to be ignored, to be abused, to be mistreated purely because of the colour of their skin and the accent of their voice. Yeah. That is what has happened. We talk endlessly in this country about the problem, but nonetheless relatively small problem, residual problem of racism in this country. Yeah. This was institutional racism, institutional classism, all targeted and directed at the white working class in this country. These stories were known, these tales were blaringly obvious to everyone. They were staring us in the face. But because they were white, because they were working class, they were just ignored. Yeah. Never again.
Absolutely. Well, you say never again. It's happening right now. And I'm told by people who know damn sight better than me that they think the problem's worse now than it ever was. That's where we are.